Jay Shear.
Jay Shear.
Jay Shear.
Jay Shear,
business consultant.
Jay Shear.
Jay Shear Business Consulting.
Hey, everybody. I'm Jay Shear with Jay Shear Business Consulting. We build solid foundations for service-based businesses to grow and scale and achieve the results and success they deserve. And you've joined Business Minds Coffee Chat. Dwight D. Eisenhower said, "Plans are worthless, but planning is everything." Well, on today's episode, we dig into the Career Toolkit and talk about designing and executing your personal plan to achieve the career you deserve, negotiation, how to create better employee engagement and improve retention, and other essential skills for success that no one taught you. Our guest is a CTO and cybersecurity expert who has tracked criminals and terrorists on the dark web. He's a university instructor, speaker, award-winning author, one of the top-ranked ballroom dancers in the country, and does stand-up comedy. He's been teaching for 20 years at MIT's Career Success Accelerator and speaks regularly at conferences on cybersecurity, technology, and entrepreneurship. Please welcome the man who owns more than 400 cufflinks. We'll talk about that, Mark Herschberg. Mark, it's great to see you. Thank you so much for joining us today.
thanks for having me on the show and for that wonderful introduction.
It is my pleasure. I'm really excited to dive into this conversation today. So let's jump right in. I would love to really start with a thumbnail sketch of your origin story. So take us back, if you will, and share some of the early experiences that you had from your youth that have shaped who you are today, your belief systems, and also those things that led to the work that you're doing today.
I have this very interesting dual career, as you noted. Growing up, I was a classic 80s nerd, very into math, science, all the STEM fields that we talk about today. So naturally, I went to MIT, where I got a bunch of science and engineering degrees. When I came out of MIT, I started as a software engineer in the 90s. And I realized early on, I wanted to become a CTO, the Chief Technology Officer. To get that job, it wasn't just about being the best engineer. Sure, I needed strong engineering skills, but I realized there were all these other skills: leadership, hiring, negotiating, communicating, team building. No one ever taught these to me. So I had to develop them in myself. And as I was doing so, I realized they're not just for executives. They are for everyone from the most junior employee. They're for entrepreneurs and solopreneurs. They're for everyone. So I began to train up my team. As I was doing so and moving along my path to become a CTO, MIT had done research giving them the same information, hearing companies wanted these skills in people they hired. Not just recent grads from MIT, but everyone everywhere they would hire, but they couldn't find it either. So MIT decided to create the Career Success Accelerator program. When I heard about it, I reached out. I said, I've been developing these skills in my employees, happy to share what I've developed. I thought I'd talk to them for an afternoon, but they asked me to help develop the course and then asked me to help teach. They said, we have wonderful professors from Sloan and School of Engineering. They're world-class experts, but you bring a perspective as a practitioner. And so we then created the class to have both professors and practitioners like myself. I've been fortunate that in addition to my CTO career, where I've built traditional startups and I've helped Fortune 500s build startups, I've also been teaching and speaking for the past 20 years, and now, of course, have the book, The Career Toolkit.
Wonderful. Well, we're going to definitely jump into the Career Toolkit here in a few minutes. I'd be curious to find out, though. Let's take a step back a bit further. So you started off with talking about MIT and going to school there. Let's go back even further. So had you always been interested in math? Has it been a strong suit of yours since the time that you were a child?
As far back as I can remember. I loved math. I loved chess. I just love doing math problems. I've got one of my nephews is exactly the same way. When I come over, we just do math problems together. There's something in our family DNA that some of us seem to really like math.
I love that. What is it about math that speaks to you? Or let's talk about what spoke to you at that point in your youth, because maybe the excitement around it has changed throughout the years. But what was it about math?
There is a logic to math. I am a very left brain person, and the fact that you can just go from A to B to C, that there is a logical path and can see how one thing follows from another. There are strict rules, so it makes it easy to understand. And I loved that as a kid. As I got older, as I certainly did in college, I loved some of the really fascinating proofs, learning about things like there's different types of infinity. We always thought infinity was the biggest number. Well, no, there's bigger infinities and smaller infinities, or things like Gödel's incompleteness theorem that we can't possibly know everything out there. You get some really fascinating answers through math.
So, staying on the path of math, who were some of those amazing mentors and mathematicians that you've been attracted to, that have always been of interest to you?
Well, for personal mentors, my father was fantastic in encouraging math and science in me, and sitting there and playing chess with me and doing math problems with me and helping to nurture it. Both of my parents did, but I did a lot more with my dad. I was lucky that in the school system I grew up in, I went to Crow Island, which is part of the New Trier school system. And they had a lot of great resources, a wonderful gifted and talented program run by a woman named Dr. May.
Okay.
I then was lucky, my sixth grade math teacher, who I'd gotten to know over summers prior in some summer programs, Mr. Conrad Smith, was just probably my all-time favorite teacher. And I did have him for math. He further encouraged me by giving me extra types of math problems and teaching me math games. And all these people, I think, really just helped nurture me along this path.
Wonderful. Wonderful. I remember I had an opportunity when I was very young to be part of a talented and gifted program when I was in school. And it truly was a game changer for me. I think it actually saved me in a lot of different ways, but it also exposed me to areas of creativity and exploration that I'm not quite sure I would have otherwise had. So I'm a big believer in programs like that, especially when we're young. It's amazing. So share with us something that you believed about yourself early on that you discovered later wasn't true.
I thought I was just purely a left brain person. I was not emotional. I wasn't good at connecting with people. I wasn't good at forming those relationships or being a leader or any of the other skills I ultimately spoke about. I realized later on all of these skills are learnable. And by putting the time and effort into it, I realized I can actually be good at these skills as opposed to that early mindset of, well, this is just how I am. I'm that nerdy kid. I'm just not going to be good at these other things.
Interesting. At what point in your life did you start to discover that these are skills that you could learn and then began to actually learn those skills?
Different points for different parts. So I wanted to get better at public speaking, and I joined the debate club in high school and continued my progression well through my 20s in terms of speaking ability, public speaking. In terms of socialization, I focused on that a lot in college, to the detriment of some of my grades, certainly. But I worked on being more social and more outgoing in college and continued to grow and develop throughout my 20s and 30s. And some of these other skills like leadership and negotiating, those were very active pursuits throughout my 20s and even today.
Very good. So, as I've looked over your book, it's interesting to me, and I know this is one of the areas we're going to touch on, that this information wasn't available, at least in a comprehensive format. And I remember sitting down in high school with a guidance counselor trying to figure out, what am I going to do with my life? And there was really no available tools. Those conversations were very brief, but once you go out into the world and you start interviewing and you start to try to figure out, what is it that I want to do? How do I show up for a job interview? All of those sorts of things, negotiating, all of it just was not available. So first, why is it that all of these amazing subjects that you cover in your book, why aren't these available? Why aren't these taught in school?
Yeah, it's a really good question, because as adults, we realize how important they are. Now, at the high school level, the reason is because high school is a relatively modern invention created for the industrial world. When we were leaving the farms, we said, well, it used to be you learned from your dad if you were a boy, or from your mom if you were a girl, and you learned everything you needed to know from them. But once we left the farms and went off to the factories, we needed basic skills to survive in industrial companies and in the cities. We needed that reading, writing, and arithmetic. So high school goes back about 150 or so years. You didn't need to know how to network or negotiate to sit there and work on a factory floor. Those skills weren't so important. High school didn't have to worry about teaching that. Now, at the university level, that goes back about 900 years. Universities are run by professors who are wonderful people, but very narrow in their focus. The professors are people who became deep experts. So when you say, well, I want to be an accountant, the accounting professors say, all right, well, here's what we're going to do. We're going to make you take these classes and those and some intermediate, some advanced. If you take all these classes, we, the experts, have decided you get this piece of paper showing a certain level of knowledge. That's really all it is. The paper just says you have acquired a certain level of knowledge in accounting or whatever your field is. It's not saying that you're a good accountant. It's certainly not saying that you're a good employee. It just says you have knowledge. And back maybe about 70 years ago, back mid-century, when you were that cog in the machine in the corporate world, when you sat there as an accountant and your boss would tell you, do this report, and you'd say, yes, sir, and you do it, and they say, here you go, sir, what next? All you had to really focus on was accounting. But in today's world and workforce, where we have teams that are more hybrid, I don't mean work from home, I mean different people from different departments, where your boss expects you to be proactive and figure out, what do you think you should be doing? And here's a goal, but you figure out what to do. We need additional skills for that. And unfortunately, the university system moves slowly and has not caught up to that need.
So is this, knowing that there was that gap, is that really the catalyst behind wanting to write the book?
Very much so. It's why we created the class at MIT. And now for years, I was pushing the group at MIT saying, we know this isn't just for MIT students. We need to expand this. MIT, of course, led online courseware. We were the first to take our classes and say, here we go, online, free for anyone. But we didn't have the resources to put online. We didn't have the resources. I wanted them to expand it, give it to other universities. Just for internal reasons, we weren't able to do that. So I originally intended to just write up a handful of notes. Our class is experiential. Our students we're not lecturing at them. The students aren't scribbling notes. They're doing. And I thought, all right, they're not taking a lot of notes. Let me write up some notes for the students, and then we can share this online or with other places. I thought I was writing 20 pages of notes, but 20 pages became 40, became 80. And at a certain point I said, I think this is a book. So that was really how it grew from just a little side project into a full book.
Very interesting. So you just began to share some of what the experience was like, or basically how the book came to be. What was the actual experience of writing it like for you? Do you enjoy the writing process? Is it something that brought you joy? Was it a challenge? If so, share what some of those challenges were. And also, were you surrounded by others who were encouraging you along to bring this book to life?
The writing process was fairly easy for me, but there's a caveat. People ask, how long did it take you to write the book? And the answer was around 4 months or so. However, here's the caveat. I've been teaching this for 20 years. So the writing was really just taking what's been developed in my head and getting it on paper. The great thing is, and I hear this from readers, they say, oh, I'm reading your book. I read something, I have a question, I flip the page, and you've answered the question. Well, it's not that I'm this brilliant writer. I've taught for 20 years. I know when I say this is immediately the question I'm going to get. I've had that over and over. So really, when I was writing, I thought about standing in front of a group, mid-career professionals, my students, all the different groups I speak to, and just thought, okay, imagine you're in front of me. Now I'm just going to type out what I would say to you. So the writing part was easy. I will say I've done lots of startup companies, and we know with startups, you get that volatility, you get that good days and bad days. And there were times I said, oh, this is great. I'm so excited about this content. And I put it aside for a bit so I can come back and review it. I review and go, oh my God, this is garbage. And back and forth. And some days, oh, I love what I wrote. Some days, no one's going to read this or going to laugh at me. So I had a lot of that volatility. The thing that surprised me, having been a CTO, I've done multi-million-dollar projects. I've had lots of different vendors all over the world, very used to running projects. I thought, okay, that part of the book will be fairly easy. I chose to self-publish because of the app and a few other reasons. So I thought, all right, well, I can hire a designer for the cover, and I can hire the indexer, and I can hire people to do this. I just made some bad hiring decisions, and it took us 3 months to do the layout. They just made mistake after mistake after mistake. I had to meticulously review over and over. And much like being a business owner, the buck stops here. I am responsible. Most people, even the ones you hire, probably don't care quite as much as you do. And I had to be meticulous in reviewing and catching all those little mistakes. If I had a better person doing it, I think it would have gone easier. So I had a bunch of bumps for that part of it.
So what would you say then were some of the key lessons learned throughout that whole process?
Few lessons. First, do talk to people who have done it before. I was lucky. This goes to your earlier question that I didn't answer. I have some friends who have written business books, and that was great because I spoke to them and they gave me some great advice. Second, learn about the field. Anytime I go into an industry, because as a CTO, I move between different verticals. I might be in media for a couple of years, then I'm back to cybersecurity, then I'm doing a labor marketplace. I've moved around a lot of different verticals. I spend a lot of time learning about the vertical. What's going on in the markets? Who are the big players? What are the trends? Why are the margins like this? What's driving that? So I read about 1,500 articles on every aspect I could on publishing to really understand it. So learn about the field and make better hiring decisions. That's really important. I know that in my regular job, and certainly for these contractors, it was just a good reminder.
Excellent. And it's so interesting how those lessons learned cross over and apply to so many other areas of life and our business in general. So thank you first and foremost for sharing that. And it's never an easy process. I mean, the information was up there, right? You've been teaching it for 20 years. So the information was there, but then taking that from here to paper and then creating the book and presenting it in a way that others can consume the content and learn from it. It's a process. It's definitely a process. So we are talking about the Career Toolkit, and this book came out in 2021. Is that correct?
Yeah, about 1 year prior to when we're recording this.
Okay. All right. Excellent. So the book is really, it's broken down into three big key areas. So you have career, you have leadership and management, and then you have interpersonal dynamics. So chapter 1 is about developing your career plan. So let's talk about your career plan for a moment. So for those that are watching and listening right now who have no plan, they're looking to figure out what career path they should take. Maybe the pandemic has disrupted what their career was, and they're looking to do something different. First of all, let's talk about what a career plan entails, why it's important to have one, and what our listeners can do to actually create a career plan.
Let's start with why it's important. If you are running a business, say, okay, we've got some pretty big goals coming up. The next 2 years, here's where we want to get to. Say, all right, everyone, you know the goals. Let's all just cross our fingers and we'll check back in 2 years and let's see if we got there. That's insane. You would never just hope your business makes it. You'd say, well, we've got to be here in 2 years. Let's create a plan. Let's figure out what are the steps to go from where we are to where we want to be. That might be a timeline, a Gantt chart, a budget, checkpoints, lots of different standard project management tools. Now, we know a few things about this plan. First, we know it's going to be a little clearer in the short term than the long term. What am I doing in 2 weeks? Well, that's very clear. We're talking with these vendors and suppliers. What am I doing on day 702? I couldn't tell you exactly. I know we should be kind of pulling everything together around that time. I can't really get into the details. So the earlier part of your plan is going to be more detailed than the later part. The second thing we know is we are not going to follow the plan to the letter. It's going to change. No plan ever totally works out. And that's okay. As long as we have a plan, we can start to figure out, are we off the plan? If so, how do we get back onto the plan? It's okay to change the plan. I said we were going here in 2 years, but things changed. Maybe a pandemic came along, maybe a good opportunity. We're going to shift our goals and update our plan. That is totally fine in business. All of this applies to our career plans. Now, our careers, much longer than 2 years. So we want to have that plan. Like our project plans, it's okay if they are fuzzier the further out we go. And it's very okay. In fact, I can guarantee they will change. So just like our project plans have regular checkpoints and check in. At a minimum, I suggest doing it once a year. If you're an employee, doing it at your annual review is a good time. If you want to do it more than once a year, and I recommend at least twice, maybe even 4 times, take your phone right now, put a little note saying, I am going to spend 30 minutes thinking about my career, and then make that recurring meeting every 3 or 6 months. All I'm asking, 30 minutes, 2 or 4 times a year. That seems like a pretty small investment for something as important as your career, but this gives you that regular checkpoint and cadence.
So following that logic, what types of questions should we be asking ourselves when we do these quarterly check-ins?
There's a whole bunch. In fact, at the end, I'm sure we'll give the website, and I even list them on the website. They're in the book, but I put them up on the website as well. There are the obvious ones about the job itself. How many hours a week do I want to work? How much time do I want to spend on the road? Do I want to be more customer facing or more internal? All important questions. But don't forget about questions about your life, not your job. Where do I want to live? What type of impact do I want to have on my community, on society, on my industry? What are my family plans? Think about your life needs. Do you just need a home big enough for 2 kids, or do you want to have 3 fancy vacation homes? It tells you how much money you need. So think about the needs of your life as well as your job, and make sure your career fits into the life you want, as opposed to trying to create a life around the job and career that you have.
Okay, perfect. And we are going to be providing a link so everyone can not only purchase the book, right, but then also dig deeper so they can better understand the concepts and apply them in their own lives. So let's talk for a couple of moments about negotiating. And I'm sure we can all agree that negotiating is important, but how many people actually do negotiate when it comes to their careers? And when they do, what can they do to increase the level of success and be able to achieve what it is they actually want?
Let's first talk about the importance of this. And there's a very easy demonstration we can do. Imagine you're 30 years old and you have a job offer for $70,000. Instead of just taking the job as is, you've learned to negotiate. You read my book or another book or took an online class, however you did. Say, okay, I've learned a little about negotiating. So instead of taking the job, I'm going to spend 5 minutes negotiating the offer and get up to $71,000. That's a pretty small increase. We can all imagine doing it. If you do nothing else after those 5 minutes, if you sit in that job the next 30 years of your career, you've just earned $1,000 more for 30 years. In 5 minutes, you just got yourself $30,000 more. Of course, you're not going to stay in that job for 30 years. You'll have other jobs and promotions. You'll get bigger raises. If you learn to negotiate, you can add tens of thousands, even hundreds of thousands of dollars to your lifetime earning. And now we're just talking about compensation. We negotiate, of course, not just with our employer, but also with our suppliers and our partners. We negotiate all the time with our coworkers. And if we can get just even a little bit more effective in doing so, there is a massive return. Now, for employers, they first think, wait a second, if my employees learn to do this, there's $1,000 more for each employee. This is starting to add up. But here's the thing about negotiating. Negotiating often, it's not simply about how we divide the pie, but how we can increase the pie. That's one of the things we do when we negotiate. How do we together create a bigger pie? I'm still going to try to get as big a piece as I can. But if I increase the pie, your smaller piece is now worth more to you, and you're happy with that. When we train up our whole organization, okay, suppose each employee does get $1,000 more, let's say 1% more. Well, you're also going to have salespeople who are going to get 1% more out of your customers. You're going to get 1% better on your suppliers, 1% more of your partners. Those internal discussions are going to be 1% better. And so if you train everyone up, the whole pie, how well your company does, gets even bigger. You can easily give them that 1% more, that extra $1,000 per employee per year. So this is why we want to learn to do it. Now, here is one of the biggest things people don't realize about negotiating. When you turn on the TV and you watch your favorite sports team, you turn on generally right as they're taking the field, and you watch them play, and then they step off the field and you turn it off. The cameras turn off. What you saw was a tiny percentage of what they actually do. Most of the time, they're training and preparing. They're doing drills. They're playing scrimmage games. They're watching how does the other team play and what's our strategy before we set foot on the field. Most people think of negotiating as when you walk in the room, but in fact, you want to prepare ahead of time. Top negotiators can spend more time preparing than actually at the table. So spend time thinking about what is it you want? What is your bottom line, your BATNA, best alternative to negotiate agreement? That's your walkaway price. What might the other side want? What things might you be willing to trade off? When you go in, you are prepared and not surprised every time something happens at the table.
Excellent. Excellent information. So as you think about negotiating, and as you were writing this particular chapter and all that you teach around negotiation, what do you find are the common pitfalls that people run into when it comes to negotiation? So obviously preparation, lack of preparation could be one, not asking for something could be another, but let's hone in on some other areas that you see as problematic, problems that you've seen in negotiations.
A big one is that we get emotional, and it could be, I want a job. Maybe I don't have one at the moment. And okay, here's a job offer and I want it, but if I negotiate, maybe if I push too hard, I'm not going to get it. And so I'm scared of pushing too hard. I'm scared of blowing the deal, because if I blow this deal, I'm in trouble. I don't have a backup job. This could be true for your salespeople. They really want to hit that quota. It's the end of the month, end of the quarter. I can't make this deal happen. And their emotions take over and they act out of fear or anxiety, or sometimes happiness and overeagerness. So it's important that we check our emotions. Now, that's not to say you can't use emotions at time. Relationship building does matter in certain types of negotiations. You can even show frustration or anger appropriately, but it should be intentional and not an outburst that you didn't intend, that you didn't control. When I show emotion at the table, it was very intentional when I did. So letting emotion get the best of us is a very common pitfall.
Okay, great. Thank you for sharing that. So let's move on to the next big section, which is leadership and management. And this is a great section of the book. And in each of these sections, you drill down, you go into detail. So there's chapters that fall under each big key area. So let's pick one or two of the main sections of leadership and management, and let's share with our audience about the main topic itself. And then let's provide maybe some tools or strategies that they can put into practice that can help them become better leaders or better managers.
The biggest challenge I see with leadership is people think leadership is a title. I will be a leader when I am in this position. And it's important to understand that's authoritative leadership. Really, it's just authority. It's, well, I'm in charge of you and you have to do what I say, or I'll fire you or not give you a bonus. That's command and control. That's not what we really talk about as leadership when we discuss it in business schools, when we teach people. True leadership is influential leadership. And if you think throughout history, you think of great leaders like Martin Luther King, whose birthday we just celebrated recently. He had no authority when he started. He certainly wasn't elected to any office. He wasn't even in charge of certain groups. He just said, this is me. This is the future I see. And if you work with me, here's one I believe we can achieve. And people said, I believe we can. I think you're the person who can help us get there. I will follow you. I will do what you say. I will commit to working with you. And that's the type of leadership we want. So we need to think influentially. And that's true even for those of us who have authority. I'm a CTO. I have people under me. I could say to my team, well, do it because I said so. But pretty quickly, my engineers are going to quit. Engineers are notorious for not liking being told what to do. And even employees where, yes, you can command them, if you can influence them, if you can convince them this is why we need to do this, anything from why we need to clean our bathrooms to why we need to deliver excellent customer service to why we need to come up with a new innovation in our product, that's going to likely motivate them more than because I said so and I'm the boss.
Makes perfect sense. So how do you distinguish the difference between a leader and a manager?
It's very subtle, and there's lots of debate over this. Now, before I give my definition, I note at the end of this section, good leaders manage and good managers lead. Very rarely do we say, okay, I'm just leading right now. No management, just leading. Or, oh, now I'm going to jump into management. No leading at this moment. You generally will intersperse both. I train them individually. I talk about it individually in a very wax on, wax off type of way, look at the fundamentals, and then we put them all together. The best definition I have for how they are different comes from a quote. Nobody has ever managed men into battle. In fact, you put those two together and you can see the difference. And when you think about it, you really start to understand it doesn't tell you what it is, but you start to get that essence.
Fair enough. Well, thank you for sharing that. That's a great quote. So you gave some examples of a great leader, some great leaders, characteristics of a great leader. When you think about business today, and you look around the business landscape, without naming names, are there some specific leaders that you think about that are not effective? And if so, why? What do you see and what can we learn from that?
Today, especially, we're recording this right in the midst of the Great Resignation. And why are some companies losing out? Sure, money's some of the issue. We see certainly there's wage pressure and people are saying, I can get more money somewhere else. But what we're really seeing is people aren't simply saying, I want a paycheck, just pay me money and I'm happy. They want more. And one of the things employees want most is engagement, is a company who listens to them, who cares about them. We saw a tale of two companies back last spring, or the consequences from what they did, sorry, 2 springs ago, back in 2020. There were companies who in April and May just said, look, it's tough, but we got to keep going. In fact, we're losing customers. Everyone just buckle up and come on, we got to do this, or the company's in big trouble. And then we saw companies say, you know what, crazy times right now. We feel it, you feel it. Tell you what, in May, we're just going to have Fridays off, paid free Fridays for everyone. Be with your family, de-stress. We know this is tough. Or we're taking a week off. Or we're giving everyone $500 to just upgrade your home office. We know we're all working from home. Who knows how long back then? So you want a better chair, you want a better video camera. Here's money to do what makes it better for you. So company said, we hear you. We know it's tough for you. We're here to try and help you. And those are the companies that then down the road, once things, I'll say, stabilized and people weren't quite in what the heck's going on, those companies continue to retain employees and even attract new ones, while the ones who just said, sorry, this is just life now and it's tough for all of us, they started to lose their employees. So I think the big thing leaders can do today is listen to their employees.
Wow, that's a big one. I love that. And we've seen so many examples today. Fortunately, we're hearing more about it. We're seeing more about it, more stories about these businesses in the news that are making good decisions, that understand the need to listen and care about their employees and make good business decisions and think long term. And I think that's incredibly valuable. So let's talk about the third big area of the book, and that's around interpersonal dynamics. So let's talk about some of those interpersonal dynamics. And again, let's share some strategies, some resources that our listeners can apply to help them in this area of their careers.
Within that section, I've got 4 chapters: negotiation that we talked about, also communication, networking, and ethics. Networking is a big one. We've all heard about networking. This, in fact, this really kills me, because from the time we're little kids, we've had people tell us networking, it's so important to your career. Well, if it's so important, how come no one ever sat us down and said, here's how to do it? We just assume people learn by osmosis. The thing most people get wrong when it comes to networking is they think it is about collecting business cards. We have that image of the sales guy walks into some conference and 30 minutes later, he walks out with a dozen business cards and we go, oh, wow, he's great. That's what we see in a montage in a Hollywood movie. Or it's a number of LinkedIn followers. Oh, look, I have such a large number of connections on LinkedIn. Saying someone on LinkedIn who's connected to you is in your network, that's like saying someone who swiped right on you on a dating app is now your significant other. That's not how it works.
Great
now,
point.
When 2 people swipe right, okay, there's mutual interest, but now you have to build that relationship. We call that dating. When you connect with someone on LinkedIn or you get the business card, you have to build that relationship. That's all it is. And you know how to do it. Networking is relationship building. Now, one change that's happened during the pandemic, a lot of people said, well, we can't network during the pandemic because I can't go out and get business cards. This was earlier on. Now we're in a more stable place. Well, true, back in May of 2020, it wasn't so easy to meet people and get business cards, but that didn't mean you couldn't build the relationship. And this is one of the silver linings to the pandemic. It used to be if we wanted to build our relationship, we might meet for coffee, but that only works if we're in the same city. In 2019, if I called you up and said, hey, listen, I would like us to do a virtual coffee. We're going to sit there with our video cameras on and chat. You say, okay, wait, that's weird. That's not something I've heard anyone doing, but now it's normal. And so when you have this bonus time that we got from not going in the office, many of us are moving to hybrid workplaces. So if it turns out Fridays, you're not going into the office, Fridays are work from home, you just saved a half-hour commute each way. So take one of those 2 30-minute periods and say, I'm doing every Friday morning a virtual coffee with someone. Hey, are you free this Friday? let me know some times next month. Would love to just catch up with you. And so we can use that time and the fact that we do video chats now, or audio if you just want to do a call, use that time to reach out and build and foster those relationships.
So good. And I want to go into another chapter as well under the same section. But before we do that, since you brought up LinkedIn and accepting connection requests, things like that, what are some good practices that our audience should be thinking about employing when they're connecting with someone or want to reach out to someone on LinkedIn or some other social platform from a business perspective?
There are different schools of thought. I'm a person who treats my network like my home. And so I'm not going to add you to my network. I'm not going to put you into my LinkedIn connections unless I'd effectively invite you to my home, unless I have some level of trust. The great thing is everyone in my network, I can say something positive about them. I can make some reference. Some are people who I've known for 30 years. I have a lot to say about them. Some are newer connections who I know more casually, but I can at least say something positive as opposed to strangers. That makes my network more valuable for people who are in it. Everyone in it knows if I'm connected to someone and they want an introduction, I can potentially make that happen. It's not, oh, I don't know, that's some stranger, we just connected, I don't actually know her. So that adds some value. Now, when you're reaching out to some stranger, first ask, do you actually want to be connected or do you just want to talk? It's fine to say, I just want to have a call with you. Don't actually need to connect with you. We're just going to call because maybe I'm going to sell you something or we're going to talk about a partnership. That's fine. You don't have to connect to everyone you speak with. But remember, when you reach out, especially if you want a connection, explain almost what the value is to the other person. Give them a reason they want to do this, as opposed to, hey, stranger, I just want to connect with you. Okay, you probably also want to come into my home. Doesn't mean I just want to let everyone in.
Makes perfect sense. And I have found that when I have not followed that logical path that you just took us down, that the moment I connect with someone, within about 60 to 90 seconds, I get a message trying to sell me something, trying to push some product, service, whatever it happens to be. And really going to your point, let's establish a relationship first. There has to be rapport. I need to understand how your service product could potentially fill a need, but provide something of value first. Let's do that first, and let's build the relationship before you try to sell me something.
The mistake many people make with networking is that they think this is networking. Now imagine you're out at a bar, you meet some people. Hey, you seem like a nice guy. Listen, this weekend, I got to pack up my apartment and move. So glad we met tonight. Why don't you come over Saturday? We're going to spend 6 hours boxing everything up. What are the odds you're going to say yes? If, however, we've known each other since college, we were roommates, we've been great friends, and I say, listen, I need a favor. Movers just flaked on me. Can you come over this weekend, help me out? So yeah, Mark, I've known you for 20 years. You've been great. You've been there for me. Of course, I'll come over. When you show up and meet a stranger and say, hey, stranger, here's my need, that's not a great way to start a relationship. Now, if your job is cold calling, certain types of sales are cold calling, that's fine. But let's be upfront. You're cold calling, you're trying to sell. Don't pretend that's networking. Don't pretend you care about the relationship. You just care about the sale. Be upfront about it.
Absolutely. I love that analogy of the mover. That's perfect. So let's talk about ethics, such an important topic, and you've included that in your book as well. So walk us through some of the key lessons that fall under ethics, which we should be paying attention to, and some valuable lessons learned in this area.
Ethics is a topic everyone says, oh, yes, it's important, but they don't do much about it. I'm hoping it's because most people don't know what to do, as opposed to saying, well, but it's costly to have ethics. So I hope we can all get better. And it's really a shame that more business books don't bring up ethics as a topic. And I very much want to make sure this was an equal chapter to everything else I covered in the book. And it is on the list of these skills. By the way, the list of 10 is not what I dreamed up one night. This is from surveys done at MIT and elsewhere about these are the skills companies want. And ethics is on that list. I want to show, yes, it's equally there. Let's first talk about why ethics can be hard. If we think back to our childhood, back in school, we used to do fire drills. Teacher would say, okay, we're going to do a fire drill. You're going to hear the alarm. And what are we going to do? We're going to line up and walk single file. Don't run, don't push, don't use the elevators, use the stairs. And we practice. I've been in buildings where the fire alarm has gone off. No problem. No one's shoving. No one's going for the elevators. We all know what to do, and we all do it. When it comes to situations that we face in business, ethical situations like, am I going to make payroll in 2 weeks? So now you're in that same pressured situation. Now, the fire might have had the pressure of minutes. Here you have the pressure of maybe days or a few weeks, but you still feel that pressure. Oh my God, we're not going to make payroll. We're going to have a problem. What do we do? You haven't had training in what to do, or specifically, you haven't had training. What you should do might vary on your circumstances, but you haven't had training for, by the way, don't use the elevators. We've never thought about where are those limits. Sure, we know don't go rob a bank. That one's pretty clear. But where can you cross lines? Oh, can we borrow from the pension fund? No, I'm going to pay it back. Really, I mean to be good, but the pressure, it's just temporary. I'm going to just kind of skirt that line. I'm going to be just 1 foot over it. That's where we make the mistakes. And when we have some type of practice, when we've talked about and said, here are the limits, here's what we can and can't do, here are the lines we shouldn't cross, it's easier under pressure to say, yeah, wait a second, don't do that. Now, raiding the pension fund, that might be right up there with stealing from the bank. It's a pretty clear one, but we do get fuzzier areas. We do get areas of, well, if I just maybe start selling the user data, that can get me some short-term money. Yeah, we didn't exactly say we were going to do that, but we didn't say we weren't going to do it. So I guess we can. That's where you run into trouble.
You know, this is such a valuable area to talk about. And it's, you know, I look at some of the examples that you just gave, and some of them obviously came across as well, what should be obvious, but it's almost like that saying that it's common sense, but common sense isn't so common. And these are things that for any business owner, we really do need to give some serious thought to, and never assume that our employees know the difference between right and wrong, or those gray areas, right? We would like to think that everyone's going to take an ethical stance and take the right approach, but we really do need to clearly identify how we operate in these areas, what, to your point, what we can do, what we don't do, and how we address these things, train on these things. So when it does happen, we know exactly how we're going to address it. There's no questions.
Everyone in the world is clear on things like don't rob a bank. But we can imagine, let's take a case, sexual harassment, where we know people draw the line differently. Now, there are certain things that should be clear to everyone, and some people get it, but just choose not to. But even saying, hey, wow, you look really sexy in that dress. In US culture today, we've said that's perhaps not an appropriate thing to say. But there are other cultures in the world where that is an acceptable statement. And if someone makes that statement, they are not crossing an ethical line. That's within the normal boundaries. So we have to recognize different people, well-meaning people, may just draw the lines differently. Even, for example, we think in Europe, even with a business partner, you might kiss the partner on the cheek. Right? We see that in certain European countries. You certainly wouldn't do that in the United States. So just different definitions, different understandings of well-meaning people. And if you can have these differences across international borders, recognize we can have them, maybe not as pronounced, even within our borders, that two different people grew up in different cultures or communities may just draw the line slightly differently, well-intentioned. And so by having these explicit discussions, we can be clear about where the lines are.
So true. So much great information there. So in addition to writing the book, you also, and you alluded to this early on, you created an app. Tell us briefly about the app. How did that come about? How do we use the app in conjunction with the book?
I was chatting with my neighbor one day and she said, "Oh, you should build an app for your book." Okay, good idea. What should the app do? I don't know, build an app, which is right up there with, you should sell a lot of books. Good idea. I'm going to put that on my to-do list. So I thought a lot about what could an app be. Now, most book apps are just a PDF of the book. Well, you don't need that. That's what Kindles are for these days. So what could the app be? And I thought a lot about learning. I thought about media. I've worked in both these fields. And one thing we know is that when you read a book like this, you tend to forget it within about 3 weeks. You go, oh, there's great information, but then you move on. You're reading another book, you're busy at work. You forget a lot of what you learned. My job is not to sell you paper. My job is to change the way you think. So I want you to remember this. There's a technique known as spaced repetition. That's a fancy name for don't just read the book once before the test. Excuse me. Don't just read the book once before the test. Open up again. Look at it before the test, maybe 2 or 3 times. That's what we call studying. So I wanted to provide that. Now, a common way to do this, flashcards. We all remember flashcards from school. I wanted to give that experience. Now, here's the key. There are flashcard apps out there, but you're not going to want to open a flashcard app. You're not going to remember to do that. So the innovation, we wound up filing a patent on this, is when you download the free app from the Android or iPhone store, you just need to open it once a month so we know you're active. We're not going to be bothering you. And then at a time you set, it's going to pop up one of the notifications from the book, one of the tips. It's as if you went through a book with a highlighter, appears on your phone, you read it, you say, oh, okay, that's interesting. Swipe, 2 seconds later, done. That's going to help keep it top of mind. Or you might say, oh, I'm about to go into a networking event. I read Mark's book 6 months ago. What do? Open it up, good, the networking tips, flip through those, and they're right there. You do the refresher 5 minutes before you walk into the room. So the app is there to help you get more value from the book, and it's completely free.
Love it. What a great idea. Well, we're going to obviously provide links to this in the show notes as well. So how to download the app, where you can find it, and then also links to the book itself. And please, for everyone that's watching and listening, understand that we have just barely scratched the surface. There is so much value in this book. So we would encourage everyone to go out and purchase a copy of it and apply the lessons learned. So, Mark, before we wrap up, what challenge would you like to leave our audience with?
These skills are helpful not just for yourself, but your entire team. And so you want to train up your whole organization to do this. I actually have free resources on the resources page for how you can do this, and it involves creating peer learning groups. So don't just say, I want to learn these skills. Say, we want to learn these skills. And they are honestly best learned together. So doing this will help you and help your entire organization.
Perfect. And share with us where we can connect with you, where we can purchase a copy of the book and consume your incredibly valuable content.
You can go to my website, thecareertoolkitbook.com. There you can learn more about the book, including where to buy it. You can get in touch with me or follow me on social media. There's new content I put on the site every week. The app page will then have links to the Android and iPhone stores where you can download the free app. And the resources page has a number of resources, other books I recommend, links to free online resources to go further in these topics, and a bunch of free downloads, including a guide to help you upskill your whole organization. All of this at thecareertoolkitbook.com.
Beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. And here is my final question to you. So what is at the top of your list of goals that you haven't achieved yet? And what actions are you taking to move toward accomplishing it?
I have 2 big goals for this year. One of them is more public speaking engagements in person. Obviously, we've had a little bit of a headwind the last 2 years, so it'll be nice to get back out and see the audience when I speak with them. So for that, I'm doing more outreach and I'm getting in front of more audiences, more gatekeepers to those types of events. The second thing, the app I created for the book, it's clear that this is helpful not just for my book, but for other books, for other types of content, including I've had interest from podcasters. So we're creating a generalized version of the app that should be coming out, a beta version, in a little over a month. And this way, we're going to get other content creators, authors, podcasters, corporate training programs, so they can also have their audiences benefit from how the app helps people retain knowledge.
Fantastic. Well, two great goals, and I have no doubt that you're going to accomplish both of those. And please do keep in touch with me in regards to the app that you just mentioned and when that's going to roll out. I would be very interested to learn more about that. And I want to thank you. Thank you so much for joining us today on Business Minds Coffee Chat. Thank you for sharing of your knowledge. Thank you for sharing your book with us, bringing that book to life and helping us all be more successful in our careers and our personal and professional lives. I'm grateful for you. So thank you.
Thank you for having me on the show.
It is my pleasure. And for all of you, thank you so very much for watching and listening. And please take a moment to subscribe to Business Minds Coffee Chat. Rate the show and leave us a review. Mark and I, we would love it if you would provide maybe one or two key takeaways from this particular episode. And to enjoy more episodes and to learn how Jay Shear Business Consulting can help build a solid foundation for your service-based business, all you have to do is visit jayshearbusinessconsulting.com. And until next time, keep learning, keep growing. Pick up a copy of the Career Toolkit and apply the lessons learned. And we'll see you on the next Business Minds Coffee Chat. Take care.
Jay Shear.
Jay Shear.
Jay Shear. Jay Shear.
Business consultant. Jay Shear. Jay Shear Business Consulting.